Yotele, yotele, ay, oh, yotele, 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 ay, oh, yotele, 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 ay, oh, yotele. Yotele, yotele, ay, oh, yotele. Say hello to my indigo rattle. He's a little friend of mine. And it's kind of late here, and I like my neighbors. So I figured I would level my tone with that. The ancestors still hear us, the night is clear for it. So, I hope you enjoyed that rattle deep in your bones. Lilisti Atsenata, at least come the 16th. So, what is today? Technically, that's tomorrow. But a new moon is upon us, and there are many things to consider. There's very much still a lot of the energy from our last full moon reading, and that is because it will transpire even more with the blue moon. I don't want to say conclude, but it will very much exponentially expand in that. As far as this new moon and its placement, to go back to, maybe a few months ago, and modern scientific discrepancies with verification in signals or time signatures in signals from satellites to here makes it sometimes difficult to really place these things. So, given some platforms, the moon is directly in the middle of Taurus. And in another consideration that I read, is a little farther along in Taurus and very much cusping Gemini. Interestingly enough, for all the hoopla about Uranus and Gemini, Uranus has backtracked. Uranus is not in Gemini. Uranus is very much on the cusp of. In which case, we're very much considering not just reassessment, but preparation. And people are taking that very literally. Quite honestly, if you look around you, the amount of people that are just outing themselves, that are proclaiming a positioning in some way, shape, or form, that are anchoring into some side of reality in one way, shape, or form, means they're not listening. Means they're not listening to Saturn, and Neptune means they haven't been listening to Uranus. Means they haven't been listening to a lot of planets. Let me not get too into it. Considering the most mundane sense also, it's like hypercorrections and picking sides. Most often that's what people do when they think that there's something to fix, they'll just try the opposite, or hypercorrection. Like the hypercorrection of indulgence is abstinence. The hypercorrection of one thing or another is the opposite. But in terms of Uranus moving into Gemini, what a disgrace to that energy to flatten yourself into two-dimensional sides, because it's more like that positionality is like two parties arguing, math is better, no, science is better, no, math is better, no, science is better, or 100% like years and years ago what often was the, I mean, and honestly, still now, what often is the conflation or separation is like, art is better, no, science is better, no, art is better, no, science is better. Or in like many a story, many a novel, or many a trope, the idea of different schools of thought, like the school of thought of education versus experience, being like, education is better, no, experience is better, no, education is better, no, experience is better. Or the ways in which physicists have argued for centuries, light is a particle, light is a wave, light is a particle, light is a wave. Doubling down into that will not get you far with Uranus and Gemini, nor with this new moon or the blue moon coming. This is a misunderstanding of what Gemini energy really is about, because it is about synthesis. And this is where we get into faulty leaders, into the misuse of wellness, and the ways in which it's taken beautiful concepts and diluted them into marketing tactics just for a small gain, like taking something beautiful and abstract and concretized it into something marketable, into something silly, into something small and diluted, rather than synthesizing that information to find the union, to find the truth in between, to find reading in between the lines, to see the light in between pillars, etc., etc. And this has been coming up a lot, but you'll perhaps have noticed, or maybe will come to notice more, that many who are posturing as leaders are regurgitating information, performing a pattern, but they're calling it intelligence when it's, or they're calling it intellect when it's barely even intelligence. Intelligence is a unique thought. It is not a regurgitated thought. Intelligence requires like the least amount of awareness and consciousness, whereas like repeating a pattern requires little consciousness, no consciousness at all. This is why people can be brain dead but still awake. This is why people still dream in comas. The understandings that we have about how far consciousness can go is falling short in the race, but is also full speed ahead. What was he saying? Oh yeah, intellect. Intellect is a synthesis of intelligence. Intelligence is like, cool, I know ABC fact. I know the acronym. I know 2 plus 2 is whatever. Intelligence is the synthesis of that data. Like if you think about, like back in the day, writing papers for school, your intelligence was finding those key points of information that were going to build the body of your paper. The first paragraph, second paragraph was effect and how you were backing up effect and how you were backing it up. Blah blah blah. Intellect is when you weave those thoughts together, which is what your conclusion was supposed to be, or what your thesis is supposed to be. You take these facts and you weave them together and you see what it is that they create as well. That is intellect. Intuition transcends these things because it does not drive itself from a process of, or a process of assumption. It is not just repeating patterns. It is not just assuming the likelihood of patterns. It is, in fact, outside of all of those. And so we have many people, like I said, posturing as if they have intellect, posturing as if they have intuition disguised as intellect, when in fact it is not even intelligence. It is just a pre-programmed process of repetition. It is just a loop. It is just a cycle. And breaking out of that cycle is exactly what is necessary for when Uranus and Gemini comes. Granted, that's not the only thing we're here to talk about, obviously. The moon in The moon in Taurus, as it is, or Gemini, perhaps, Gemini, perhaps, um, is very much about seeing in between those lines, because indigenous innervation of Taurus would be the eagle in the night, in which case we're not just bearing burdens, we're finding ways to fly with them. We're finding ways to expand with them. We're finding ways to ground, even like in an aerodynamic way. It's not necessarily just like digging a heel in with stubbornness and with repetition and brute force. It is very much about expanding in responsibility. Something else I've noticed, again, with this like divisive, two-dimensional nonsense, is the idea of fear and fearlessness. When in actuality, like, sure, yeah, fear is a problem, and fear is something that religious imperialism has built our identity on infectiously. Fearlessness is the hypercorrection, and fearlessness is just as combustible. It's just an external explosion, whereas fear is an internal implosion. It collapses your potentiality, it collapses your mind, breath, etc., etc. Fearlessness causes you to, run into a brick wall, causes you to expand too rapidly without stability or support. Much like the universe or the galaxy expanding at the edges of it creates this frictionary wall of fire because it is expanding too quickly or too rapidly. It is a chaotic state. Whereas, and if you think about it, fearlessness, like if you were to rid yourself of every bit of fear, then you wouldn't look both ways when you cross the street. You would just, because you're not afraid of anything. You're not afraid of getting hit by a car. You're not afraid of traffic. So you could just run straight across the street, no matter. Run straight across the highway, which is silly. It's silly when you think about it out loud. When realistically, the only way to really transmute that fear is to face it. Is to face it eye to eye and ask it what the fuck it wants or what it's hiding. What is it hiding? Because ultimately, fear is hiding from something. A fear of, I don't know, a fear of success or failure is hiding from rejection or hiding from responsibility or hiding from the perception, like being perceivable, hiding from something deeper than that. So I've talked about this before too. Asking your rational mind what you fear will only take you so far. You have to ask the other end, the other side of your mind. You have to ask the other side of your nervous system, essentially, which sounds much harder than it is. Honestly, like I've said before, it's often simple. Maybe not easy, but it is simple. For instance, if you ask yourself what you fear, and you're like journaling, right? You ask yourself what you fear, you answer yourself with your right hand. Dope, awesome. Predictive processing. Your brain's kind of like already very well aware of how it functions in that you can kind of write mindlessly. If you use your non dominant hand and you ask yourself what you are afraid of, your brain is now requiring the opposite end of it to engage, and you will struggle because it's going to be difficult, it's going to be hard, you're going to get frustrated, and you're going to be like, oh, I feel like I'm catching up, or like I'm rigid. Something new will come to mind, and there will be a moment where you're like, fuck it, I just want to write this out with the other hand. Push through that moment and allow yourself to see what else comes to mind. It will surprise you, I promise. And in that, you don't have to operate on a binary. You simply have to meet the fear to transmute it, and then you can expand responsibly outside of that. There's nothing to be gained through fear or fearlessness. There's nothing to be grown through fear or through fearlessness. But it is simply with the willpower and the integrity and the responsibility to fear, or to yourself to face fear. Responsibility to self and to progress to face fear. Your responsibility to that moment will in fact help you transmute fear. As much like I say too often with like negative entities or demons or what have you. It understands something in you, and there's a story to be told. And oftentimes people feel chased down because they are running. But when you stop and you turn and you ask it what it wants, there's always something to be learned. There's always something to be heard. In any experience I've ever had across that. And absolutely any experience I've had across that. A new moon in Taurus is asking for new growth, not new stubbornness. It's asking for like a fawn in the field. It's asking for the bull to bear birth rather than to just dig its feet in and give up. And giving up is not rest. Giving up is not restful, is not resting. In fact, it's, I think, very compacting. Where rest is required. I mean, honestly, even if the moon is partially in Gemini, is understanding the ways in which your body actually activates these things. You know, it's not just, this is my nervous system in rest, and this is my nervous system in da 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 da. They actually do really innervate in quite interesting ways and feed off of each other. The rest system actually has to be activated, and quite honestly, the active is often activated unconsciously. And so, how do we bring conscious awareness to that restfulness and to that activity rather than let the activity take control of consciousness for itself? Too often do I think that we think just because that humanity thinks that just because it's breathing, just because it's blinking means that it is consciousness, means that it is conscious, when in fact that is unconscious repetition of things that you do every day. Which is funny too, because we've also found much more information about how advanced or more complex the neurological systems of other sea creatures are, of fish, of whales, etc. And what a funny thing, because so many people in my interactions have, and that I've heard, I mean, even, gosh, not just in my personal life, but in, you know, podcast talks, interviews, or whatever, where people that are pescatarian would be like, I'm a vegetarian, except I only eat fish because they're not the cute ones. And what a silly thing to say. Because, in fact, what we thought was just like an ugly and dumb creature has a very interesting and complex nervous system and is actually very capable of awareness and self-awareness, which is maybe more so than a lot of humanity. And so the species' hierarchy on its own is falling. On its own is falling. There's also some new research to suggest that use of AI actually depletes cognitive awareness and capability. And so the more that we see all of these programs for how to use AI and how to use AI more, the less intelligent humanity gets. While again, like I said, posturing as intuition and intellect, and not really knowing the difference. And not really knowing the difference at all. And so they turn to desperation in religion, in worship, in stimulus in some way, shape, or form. And even in that, do you know the difference between worship and devotion? As far as lines of these other planets, Jupiter and Venus are very much in their own alignment. I think Mars and Saturn are very much in their own alignment, and Mars had its conjunction with the moon shortly before, which I think very much explains how viral some people can be these days, and also, the intensities of the waves, the pressure in the air, the brightness of the sun, but the coolness of the wind, how contrasting, really. And I think really just trying to offer that space in between, trying to offer that opportunity for balance in between, where most, I think, are just taking Taurus natures at Western face value and digging their heels into something that they maybe don't even fully believe in for themselves. They've just been told that it is the way. Neptune not far behind. Everybody's dreams have been weird, and quite honestly, I think offering a lot into those perspectives as well, and offering us different perspectives into sort of antithetical timelines or antithetical versions of ourselves, or alternate timelines in general, alternate versions of ourselves in general. Quite honestly, I think the Mercury and Ceres and their conjunction are feeding Venus, and Venus will feed that to Jupiter. So be very conscious of the way that it is you're feeding your mind and that you're feeding your body, because it is going to continue to feed the nervous system of yourself and the actual system of these planetary alignments as they continue to move. The Moon, Mercury, and Ceres in this beautiful, perfect line. The Mercury and Ceres also previously conjunct, but with the Sun, so radiant, and probably throbbing, probably vibrating with energy. And now to bring it to the Moon, I don't doubt that it will be just as vibratory, just as shaking. And I know there's been a lot of like mini quakes in like places like California. And there's probably more than mini quakes coming. And volcanoes and geysers and tornadoes and what have you. Um, if you've channeled with me before, then like yeah, for sure, I've felt it in my body, and it's a rumbling. It's a rumbling in our heart for sure. And unfortunately, I think the comfort of this or that, of choosing sides, offers the illusion of safety, and it's easy to fall for. It's very easy to fall for. The illusion of safety is, if not this, then it must be that, is so akin to, this constant unsatiation, or sort of like grass is greener on the other side thing. It leads to constant unrest rather than to actually process and prepare and find harmony in between, which is ultimately what those Gemini energies really want to offer, and ultimately where Taurus nature can find true composure and ease without feeling like stuck or rigid or throwing a tantrum, because it is not specifically one way. Mercury and Ceres conjunct. Mercury and Ceres conjunct. I feel like there's a very reflective nature to this. The ways in which, especially having been in the sun, it's like catching light on a mirror with Mercury and with Ceres with it, which has offered us opportunity to establish and reacquaint ourselves with the ways in which we do find nurturing, with the ways in which we do find release, so as to open the door to relief. Because this is also the thing. So much of capitalism and wellness industry is selling you relief without the release. This is also why talk therapy only goes so far, because it's selling you relief, hourly relief, when in fact there is no true release. It lacks the somatic release, and the release of simply words often re-stimulates the brain in the same patterns. So, all of that to say, it's a strange time. It's a bit of a difficult time, I think. I think it's a time, time itself has felt very wobbly, very, similar to this, like either anticipatory or worried about being left behind. Like it's rushing against, or like rushing forward, or like people are feeling so stuck that they're trapped in the past, or trapped in prior thought, or trapped in old cycles, and so they're trying to rush toward new ones when in fact the previous cycle has to be broken before a new one can be built, or the previous habits or previous ideas of the self have to be disassembled, deconstructed, before something new and more stable can be built on it. And this is antithetical to what capitalism sells you. It's like, you just need one more. You just need to replace it. This is why the age of obsolescence occurs. Because if they convince us that just buying a new replacement for everything will work, then we'll just do that to ourselves. Instead of actually take the time and effort to, you know, open the fucking case and see what's going on, we just try to become something new and then wonder why it doesn't work. It's funny. It brings me back to what I talked about a lot with the Solar New Year, and how much of it is to sell wellness programs or whatever, but is to sell this idea of, you know, start being a new you without fully understanding why this you even existed. And then people sort of get burnt out early and they're like, oh, I guess I can't pick a habit. And then it kind of sets them up for failure and then continues to set that tone for the year, which is why I optimize or opt to use the lunar calendar and energetic calendars as far as the way that energy turns. Ay, 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 ay. I think in a very simple way, perhaps if we're thinking in preparatory natures, how do we feed Venus? How do we feed Venus in us? And is that a sustainable diet? Because Venus and Jupiter will need it to be so to maintain or to help us create and thrive in a new pattern. There's a lot of things being created that are not necessarily sustainable because they are created out of desperation. And that is also prime territory for capitalism. And that is not the kind of fertile ground that we want, now is it? Hello, hi, welcome. So, we're going to pull some cards. And we're going to see what else this moon has to offer us in assessment and preparation for this moon. For this moon and all that it's connected to, and all that it has fed, and all that it will feed. So, hi, hello. If you are new here, then chances are you've probably noticed this is going to be a little different than your average tarot reader, I suppose. Average tarot reading. For one, yes, I do read tarot, but I also read cartomancy, in which case, playing cards, for me, although cartomancy, loosely defined, is oracle cards, Lenormand cards, whatever. But, much like time and space, The numbers in the elements can be found in the time of cartomancy, and when that gives us steady footing in understanding the body, in understanding place and kinesthetic sense, in understanding the elements within us and the steps that we can take, then we can expand space, bridge to space in a stable way where the symbol is imbued and expanded and not a distraction or a confusion. Something else you might notice is that I also take it as an opportunity for a breath. So if you have not read with me before, then it is an invitation for us to breathe together. You don't have to. I can't make you. But but it is a golden opportunity because utmost, I think beyond cards or bones or stones, that our first tool of knowing was in fact the breath. And it'll tell you much about the body and the mind if you open your awareness to listening. And so, if you want to tap, it's also good practice for that. If you want to tap into something, it's good practice for that. But regardless of that, or irregardless of that, I don't know, then it is an opportunity to tap into you, to tap into your body, to see where your breath is at, to see what shows itself to you in that moment. So, let's pull some cards, shall we? Much like we are hanging out, and much like there are cards in between us, because there are, we will take 3 deep breaths. And all I ask of you is that you open your body to a full breath, maybe the fullest breath you can find, and to open your awareness to any sensations that arise. Lovely. All right, my friend. Take a deep breath in. And exhale. Take a deep breath in. And exhale. Take a deep breath in. And exhale. Interesting. And it's kind of like a wind tunnel. I feel like there's a lot of mind chaos, like lack of discernment, lack of definitive definition or process, lack of like choice, maybe even like not being able to make a choice or not being sure what choice to make. A lot of unsureness and a lot of like just vast open air. It's like being caught in a wind tunnel. Maybe that relates very literally and very viscerally for some of you. Maybe you've noticed exactly that about some of the people that you're interacting. That mind fire, that wind turbulence, the ways in which the compass rose is also a compass of wind telling, and how that direction can lead you much farther than you think. And that's exactly that too, like much farther than you think when the mind is back and forth. we're not really thinking, we're trying to control thought. That's what I think overthinking is, trying to control thought and outcome rather than to listen and to be guided by sensation incorporated and integrated, knowing the difference between these things rather than just the confusion. Oh, hello. Mind fire indeed. Okay. Wow. Jack of clubs, inverted, bottom of the deck. That is, in so many ways, like, okay, let me not be. Jack of clubs inverted is very much heat, very much fire, very much wood. It is also, I think, when there's so much stimulus that we don't know what to do with it, like reactivity. Honestly, even the ways in which like our sexuality is led by physical body rather than actual understanding of connection or awareness of love. Like this is where people conflate love with attraction or conflate love with simply sexual attraction, and turn it into a very like superficial thing rather than deeply felt, deeply oriented. In a lot of ways, this is like when love isn't something you find in the heart; it's something you find in the genitals, and it's irresponsibility. The Jack of Clubs upright is like a new student, a new pupil with wide eyes, willing to learn. Whereas it inverted is very much like the like class clown, like the like quite honestly, very literally, the kid who instead of tries bullies somebody to try to make themselves feel better about their home life or what have you. That instead of engages, um, acts out so as to feel better about some sort of some outside circumstance, which we all know this, right? Most bullies, especially in grade school, are coming from a bad home. They're dealing and trying to cope with how much they feel their own life sucks. And this Jack of Clubs is like misuse of fire. It's a misuse of fire. It's in a funny way too. It's like very inverted. Like if your dick went inside. If your dick shriveled up and went inside because you didn't know how to use it, but you wanted nothing but to use it. Oh god, that's such a weird thing. It's such a weird thing to pick up. Is this what happens when I read this late? Jesus Christ. In another way that I'm getting is also unwillingness to learn new information, stubbornness, um, thinking that one knows it all, which I mean is an age old like adage. I don't know what the fuck they're called. An age old like saying. It's like what is it? Like somebody who says that they know is very telling, or like the fool thinks he knows, and the wise man knows that in fact he doesn't know everything. Something along those lines. Um, the fool assumes he knows. The wise man knows that there is more to know, that he does not know nothing. It's a rejection of information, or a rejection of energy too. Suppression of information. It's like new ideas. New ideas are shut down when old ideas are afraid of change. New ideas get kicked out of the room when old ideas are afraid of change. That is a big part of this. Nine of clubs, queen of clubs, queen of spades. All inverted. All inverted. Which does not happen. Nine of Clubs, intensity, but lack of relief, lack of satience. It's like being unfulfilled but overwhelmed. Queen of Clubs. Queen of Clubs, Queen of Spades. Fire, misdirect. Lack of trust in self, lack of trust in knowledge, lack of trust in what you know or what you feel or what you believe. Which, I mean, even with this Jack of Clubs, like the rejection of new information is also a very fragile belief system. Like if your beliefs have not been deconstructed and rebuilt, then they will fall. If your beliefs cannot be, like they kind of it's got to be built up and be able to be built back down to make sense. This is like what deconstructive processes in art even is. Like you get a better idea of the picture when you're able to disassemble it and pick it apart. And I think people who are really identifying with a fragile structure like that fear investigation. They fear questioning. This is also a key concept with religious dogma. Questioning the church is a problem, and you get exiled for it. This is a problem in the education system. Questioning the education system is a problem, and you get removed for it. Questioning the government is officially a problem, and now you're a terrorist for it. Questioning powers, it's like questioning the king. Questioning the king would have gotten you beheaded because the king is weak. Because the king's power is weak. That's what that is. 100%. Which honestly, good. In a collective sense, good. I hope that king falls. I hope that king falls. And honestly, I mean that across the board. Because any frail, fragile concept that we have built our identity on needs to come down for us to really see, like truly see ourselves, for us to really know who it is, like who we are and how it is we act. Like, I mean, also in a very real way, for everybody who lives in the world, who deals with the world on a daily basis, if you've ever heard of the idea of like, like you can live with, or you can be best friends with somebody, but living with them is a wholly different thing because you get to see how they react to different situations that you wouldn't have seen otherwise. That is also very akin to this because people can like put out a very like love and light and nothing bothers me kind of visage as if they're never fazed by anything, and it really is like just one perspective, and it isn't until you see that person or until you see yourself in completely inoptimal circumstances that you get to see just how zen you really fucking are. This is also kind of my fascination with like snake charming, because that is a whole level of zen that like I'm not really sure if I need to test if I really want to test. But I am quite honestly with everything that's happening, like yeah, we're being not put to the test, but like we are finding ourselves down a path that has quite a few more cracks in the road and obstacles, and the ways in which we manage our emotions, the ways in which we even keel our temperament, the ways in which we, and that's not to say like you can never be mad, you can never be extremely mad, you can never feel extremely sad or extremely betrayed. No, it's just you can feel those things. It's just a matter of how you deal with them. Do you make them, your reason to burn the whole world down, or do you make them your reason to heal your heart? We are finding ourselves not being led, but we are finding ourselves on the path with a lot more obstacles that could lead a lot of people to give up on themselves and go kicking and screaming, or that could lead a lot of people to really come to know themselves about how it is that they will deal with inoptimal circumstances, with, what if everything just went a little wrong? Would that ruin everything? Would that ruin your day? Or would you find other ways to grow, to find gratitude, to uh, come back to yourself? Or will you let it drive you completely outside of yourself, essentially? Um, this nine of clubs is important in that. Gosh, what am I picking at? I think it's a scarf. Or my wings. This nine of clubs is very much a level of intensity for sure, but I also think that because it's not grounded, it's also energy that will be used for something else, that will be directed towards something else. And this is 100% what the internet, what marketing, what capitalism does to you, is it takes your energy that is not grounded and it weaves you along, it breadcrumbs you along the hour-long doom scroll, all of the clickable ads, all of these distractions, because your focus isn't being grounded in somewhere, so it's free to go wherever we want it to, right? And that's something that we're going to have to bring our focus into. Like, what are you focused on and where are you directing that? Because if you do not, somebody else will for you. If you do not control that third eye focus, control that mind focus, then somebody else will. Then quite honestly, like, we're surrounded by so much media that any one of your devices will direct your focus for you if you do not have any stable sense of how to direct it for yourself. This is, the inundation with so much stimulus and overwhelm too. Quite honestly, the more I'm like seeing it, the more it's kind of like a fabricated problem and a sold solution. Like, if we create the problem, then we can sell the solution. If we can create the problem, then we can sell the solution. And if we create the problem of focus, then we can sell the solution of more unfocus. And we don't have to be that. Quite honestly, if you've read with me on TikTok, honestly, I'm thoroughly grateful, shocked, pleased, always with people and their capacity to really engage, really focus, really hear, take notes and incorporate and activate within that knowledge. And it becomes such a potent space for that. And I love that because it is an app that optimizes a lack of focus, that is designed to keep you unfocused. And so it's not something that's impossible. Obviously not. It's not something that's impossible. It's just something that you have to be willing to engage with. And outside of this fricative binary of fear or fearlessness, you have to be willing to engage, period. And honestly, I think fearlessness is a cop-out. It's an unwillingness to engage with the difficult. We don't need fearlessness. We need integrity, willpower, and responsibility to be able to meet fear and transmute it. Meet fear and relieve it from its grips, quite honestly. And like I said, simple practice that I already mentioned to really maybe see what it is that is attached to it. Quite honestly, even with choices and a meditation that I've talked about before, with fear of this choice or that choice, or fear of if you do or don't do something, or if you've made the right decision, go into meditation. And it's not even like you have to go super deep into meditation. Just sit down with yourself and imagine in your mind that you're sitting at the table with the version of you that made that decision and the version of you that maybe made the opposite or the other counterpart to that decision. And listen to them when they talk, because they will tell you what decision, how that decision benefited them or hurt them, how that decision actually played out. And that will clarify what it was you were actually afraid of in that decision. This Jack of Clubs is afraid of decisions too. That's why in inversion it acts out. That's why in inversion it's almost like motherfucker can't take a joke kind of energy, because they're taking themselves too seriously because they're so afraid of rejection. Like, motherfucker can't have a good time, have a laugh. Jack of Clubs energy can be real fun. Party pooper, but why? Because they are judging themselves, because they're constricting and critiquing themselves and taking it all too literally, all too seriously, for fear of rejection, for fear of being called stupid, for fear of being something or another. And I don't mean that to sound super harsh. However, Jack of Clubs, maybe that's a sign to not just ask our adult minds what it is we're running from, what it is we're afraid of, what it is we're repeating in the process, where it is we're finding more comfort than it is we're finding growth. What if we ask our child, or what if we ask our child self? What if we ask our child version? What if we ask our inner child, or the version of ourself that is still 8 years old and loves cartwheels in the grass? What would they say about all of this? What would they say about your fear? What would they say about how you're reassessing, how you're preparing? And quite honestly, above all, I think moving out of love for that person, for that younger you person, is where we find more willpower, rather than the old brute force, pick yourself up by your bootstraps, grab the bull by the horns, dig your heels into the dirt kind of bullshit. That's exactly that. Western Taurus superficiality is bullshit. So is Aries. So, there's a lot of fire here and a lot of air, which means if you haven't watched my Aries solar cycles, my Aries cycle of harmonies, please do. I feel like that connects a lot of dots for us, and it very much also weaved us into Taurus season. These energies, 100%, it's like completely north-south. Meanwhile, we're only operating east-west, so we're only operating on two-dimensional planes, fricative natures, and we're lacking integrity because the north-south is inverted, is confused, and in so many ways, shapes, and forms, that's what this system is. Like the Western fucking imperialistic machine was designed to invert truth. Was designed to invert truth. And this is by definition what a simulation is. Pre-technological, it is an inversion of information. It's a simulation of what is like the real. So it is not real. It is a simulation of an inversion of information. And so what you think is north is probably south, and what you think is south is probably north. And what you think you have to go toward is probably what you have to reevaluate. And what you think you have to reevaluate is probably a deeper root to something. Oftentimes I think we avoid the south, we avoid the root, and we drive so far north, or we drive so far straight, and through, that we miss the fucking point, that we, miss the frequency, we miss the point, we miss life, in a very real way that's very Machiavellian. Like, what is it? What is the Machiavellian thing? Do the ends justify the means? Do the ends justify the means? Which is all about the end result, all about the end goal. Everything in between doesn't matter. But when you're working on north-south axes or like polarities, it is a magnetism, and that's the tertiary to it. It is not just a two-dimensional binary. It is a polarity and a magnetism in product. So there's three, really. So there's always a three. There's always a lovely three. And we flatten the magnetism when we only navigate in that way. Gosh, like even very literally on the medicine wheel, the North is supposed to give back to the South, but the North, as it is about hoarding. It is not about reciprocity, it's about hoarding, which is why so many fucked up things are going on right now. Because of a desperation to hoard for resources. And why? Not because people actually believe that the US can be a world power. Most people think it's a third world fucking country. And they're afraid. They're afraid, so they're desperate for resources. So good. That's the fear that needs to be fed. Not fear of who we are without the system. And so in that, if you've done cycle of harmonies breathing with me before, fire breath and air breath, like focus that fire and clear that mind. Focus that fire and all the nerves that are attached to it, focus that nervous system. Really calibrate that nervous system and clear that mind. Clear that mind from preconceived notion and from all of that predictive programming that has you trapped in assumption or anxiety. And don't worry, if you've never done Cycle of Harmonies breathing with me before, we will do it after I pull some cards. Because it functions as a very helpful integrative exercise so that all of this doesn't just go in one ear and out the other, but is actually able to be heard in the body as well. I would also like to say that these queen cards inverted aren't like all negatory or anything. I'm reading them in cahoots with all of these. But if you look at this Queen of Clubs and Queen of Spades inverted on its own, in what it can offer, then the Queen of Spades does not need to wield to accomplish. It reminds me of like growing up hearing, never start a fight, but you always finish it. That is a grounded fighter. It's not the person that's picking the fight, but it is the person that's like, are you sure you want this? Are you sure you want this? Because I'll deliver. And this Queen of Clubs is a fire starter, is a fire illuminator. It's not just about having fire. Look, made fire. Show off. Da, 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 da. It's not like fireworks. It's not like showing off what your fire can do. It is sharing that fire. It is sharing that fire. It is like it makes me think like lighting something, like lighting a candle, lighting a torch, lighting a nightlight, like lighting a lamppost on the street, so that the illumination is shared, so that the illumination is grounded and that the path itself is illuminated, not just you, or not just the path that you're on. It is sharing of that energy, which has to be grounded. It has to be grounded and it has to be directed. Otherwise, it's like people are like, you're too intense. I don't like this frequency. Like, you're touching me too much. I don't like your vibe, kind of thing. When it could be very grounded and like look how bright this is. Look how bright and beautiful. Like lightning bugs in the night. They share with us their light without being too rowdy about it without being like rowdy and ungrounded about it. And the Queen of Swords, that sword of knowledge, is not about your fighting. It is about your honor. A true warrior does not have to draw their sword at every instance. A true warrior does not fight for war. A true warrior fights for peace. And sometimes that means not fighting at all. And that never means starting a fight. If you consider, like a sword staked in the ground is what? Perhaps a marking of presence, but is also what? Iron, so it's not piezoelectric. It's a capacitor. So electricity can pass through it. Lightning will be attracted to it. And in that, if you think too, like gardens, those like garden sticks that people will use, it attracts positive magnetism for the soil. It perhaps even aerates the soil. So it relieves the soil of compacting, much like we often do with the soil of our body, compacting emotion, compacting with pressure, with expectation, with where we feel entitlement even, and that tightness in our chest with provocation and with posturing rather than with integrity, which really opens up space. Because your posturing isn't overstretching or working too hard to hold itself up. It is, in fact, held up by its most stable parts. Much like a master of the sword is not afraid of its weight because it knows how to wield it in balance, and so it feels weightless. And many of us do not know how to make a weapon feel weightless like a tool. We really only see it for the weapon. And so reevaluate. That's something to reevaluate with, and that is something to prepare. Something that I remember being told often growing up was that a weapon that you do not know how to use is a weapon against you. Your mind is a tool. Because of that, it can also be a weapon. And if you do not know how to use your mind or your focus, it is a weapon against you. Likewise, your light, your insight, your desire, your passion, if you do not know where that comes from, where you feel it, how to use it, then it becomes a weapon against you. And this is where people get obsessed with pleasure versus pain. This is where the body can also start to redistribute and confuse those sequences, those frequencies, those processes of information, like fibromyalgia. The brain literally confuses those circuits, and so the body is overrun with pain, right? But also confusing your worth, even like your capacity to illuminate, your capacity for brightness, your creativity, your passion, and confusing your worth for it being only what people see. And like I said, even with like lighting a candle, like beyond people seeing the flame, it shows so much more than just that. It illuminates the space, the room, more than just you. And so it's able to open up and offer a different perspective and illuminate space rather than just you. And I think that's also really important because many people are just using their fire to elevate themselves to, I mean, quite honestly, even like, especially within like wellness community, within like the spiritual community, within, quite honestly, even like readers or what have you, as if like always always gearing toward this self-aggrandizement. And this is how cults are started, because it comes from insecurity. Most cult leaders are going to be some form of narcissism, which comes from insecurity. Like, who's somebody who's really insecure but thinks they're better than everybody else? A narcissist. Um, Spiritual communities or what have you, or pseudo spiritual leaders, again, like I said, posturing as intuition, but barely even having intelligence, let alone intellect, because it is just regurgitating thought and distilling it for popularity, for pleasure, for control. Um, that misuse, that misuse of fire, is about self-aggrandizement, elevating oneself as needed, as somebody to rely on, as higher than in some way, shape, or form. Quite honestly, I would argue that still functions in white supremacy rhetoric and paradigm, because the idea of supremacy in general is not a needed one. It's not a natural one or a needed one. And it distorts the message, and it distorts the frequency of any capacity for healing, which is where cults end up rising and falling, because they sell distortion rather than truth. This is something I talk about actually too in like as I'm talking about this, I'm just feeling the pressure on me. There's something in geometry of relationships too where I talk about exactly this, and the ways in which that within the trigonometry, within the geometry of a triangle of relationships, that, Latter-day Saints, Mormons, the Amish, or what have you, who say that it's their duty to honor God through multiple relationships and multiple wives, multiple children, is actually to elevate themselves to God, which puts them at the head of the house or the head of the family or whatever, and their entitlement to more, and more and more wives, more respect, more control, more children, more status, which has very little to do with anything even God related, quote unquote, but more to do with inflating the ego. Way more to do with elevating and inflating the ego. And that's not to say the ego is bad. The ego just does not need to be that inflated or that elevated. In actuality, if one were to actually consider the ways in which they could be akin to, or try to find themselves brought higher to God, it would not be in elevating in status. It would be in being the lowest of status, if anything. It'd be complete inversion and seem, and quite honestly, antithetical. But check out that video for a little bit more clarity on that. The ways in which people will elevate themselves, oftentimes in tandem, deliberately subordinating somebody else, which is why, again, the Amish, the Latter-day Saints, and Mormons have these patriarchal hierarchies, because, in order to continue to elevate the self, you would have to subordinate all of those people underneath you, the roles of the wives, the roles of women in the church, da 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 da. And so it, again, has little to do with anything spiritual at all, and has everything to do with the ego and inflation of it and conflation of the spirit with the ego. What a sad, sad existence. And it doesn't have to be that way at all. It can be a growing thing, it can expand, but it does not come with that level of posturing or that level of ego dominance. So take note of that. And where you see that, red flag. For sure, if you watch Geometries of Relationships, it's like all about how to find red flags, and they will become very clear. in not just relationships, monogamous or otherwise, but in group structures, in religious structures, in government structures as well. Okay. We pull another spirit card to bridge. Alright, my friends. Much like we're hanging out, much like there's cards in between us, we'll take 3 deep breaths. Open the body to the biggest breath that you can find and bring your awareness to any sensations that might arise. Take a deep breath in. And exhale. Take a deep breath in. And exhale. Take a deep breath in. And exhale. Oh, okay. Alright. I get it. Wind tunnel, for sure. Still, just drifting, just being led, just like so much of that's frustrating. This is not a fun feeling. Uh, it feels like lazy river, but like not in a fun way. Where you're just kind of like drifting. You know, society is very much just drifting in a lot of ways. It's frustrating, but on top of that, a lot of weight in the left arm, a lot of sharp pain in the right arm, which is very much the weight of past decisions, regret, judgment, shame, guilt, fear, the weight, the density of past versions of the self, the density of you know, all of those things, that which we regret, that which we wish we would have done, that we wish we didn't do, da 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 da, all condensed, right? All dense and like fucking swollen. And likewise, like just somebody fucking pinching me and like stabbing me in my elbow, which is like honestly, quite honestly, us, you know, very much just us internally. This is what's happening in so many minds. It's like the weights and the what ifs of what has been, and the like crude pushiness of like, but you should be doing this, but you should be doing this, but why aren't you doing this? Like, not even in a like helpful way, just in like a shit talking way, which like quite honestly, we're often the the best people to talk down to us in our own minds, right? Um, it's much easier to like should yourself in your own mind and sort of pressure yourself in that way. But has that ever been productive? No. Sitting there with yourself and being like, well, you should be writing, you should have gone farther, you should have done da 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 da, never pushes us or motivates us to do what it is we actually want to do. And in fact, perhaps it's because should is not involved. You could be doing, and what a clever what if of all the possibilities that are available. You could do this, you could do that. You could. You could forget all about that. You could. What if, in general? And like, has that ever been a helpful way that any of us have ever learned of like, sort of like looming over and like, do it right this time, and like, in a very big way, like as much as maybe, you know, all of that density and all of that weight and all of that guilt, shame, fear is something that is programmed into us by religion, by religious imperialism, especially if you had religious parents. Then they very much use those as weapons against you, and they fuse your identity to it. That is what it's designed for. But oftentimes, as much as we may have hated that, we tend to replicate it in ourselves. We tend to maybe treat everybody else differently, but we're still really hard on ourselves. We're still very much like replicating the same unhelpful behavior, let alone abusive, but unhelpful behavior to ourselves, you know? was, when you were younger in school, if your parents were screaming at you to get it done, did that help you get it done? No, it made your life more miserable. So why is it that in our minds and in our hearts, we're the ones that are like battering us to do one thing or another, or to be one thing or another, or battering us down about how far we've come, instead of support, instead of acknowledgement, instead of care and concern and nurturing? And in so many ways, that takes me back to Venus and Jupiter, and that takes me back to the moon, Mercury, and Ceres. 100%. And so consider not what you should, but what you could. Why not? What if? What's the worst that could happen? Consider, what if you didn't do things because you had to? What if you did things because you wanted to? How would that redirect your energy? How would that redirect your life? And quite honestly, even in terms of like superficial diet culture, this is why those things don't stick. Because it's not something that we've made space for in our lives for it to truly be integrated in a sustainable way. Instead, we jump on board to some, hot topic and force ourselves into another structure, and then brick it entirely because it's not sustainable, because it's too unlike, because it's not flexible enough, whatever it is. Whatever it is not sustainable. It's too rigid a structure, and it does not have the stability underneath it to be able to be applied or integrated. So you can take this literally, you can take this metaphorically, you can take this a million ways. This pattern replicates around so many ways in which we engage, indulge, and avoid. I should have known that card would come out. I should have known. Oh, interesting. How interesting. Okay. Hear me out. Three of Swords. Hermit, bottom of the deck. Interesting. What did I say about avoidance? What did I say about... Gosh, so many things. The Three of Swords is often a card of heartbreak to people. They see it and they're like, oh, yes, my life has been so hard and my heart is so wounded. And the Hermit is how we reject other things, because like, this is my last relationship was so terrible, I'm never dating again. This was my last divorce was so terrible, I'm never marrying again. This is quite honestly even the fake ass lesbians that are like, I hate men, I'm lesbian now. I'm like, no, you're not. You're just the patriarchy with tits, and you learned how to objectify women. But I digress. The Three of Swords is not just that pain. The pain is a very real part of it. However, it is very much your nervous system. It is very much the ways in which your nervous system dances around these things and dances with these things. It is very much the ways in which we isolate rather than find support. Because the hermit isn't about isolation either. The hermit, in a very superficial Western way, is like, yes, I'm too good for society and I must go to the mountains because everybody else is the problem. When in actuality, the hermit is still, like what I say about Queen of Wands, still very much illuminating, still sharing light. But the hermit is also very aware of his focus and his time and his fucking energy. And so he's like, you know what? You don't want to listen to me? That's okay. I don't have to speak to you. But I'm going to be right there. And when you're ready to listen, I will tell you the story. That's why the hermit goes to the mountains. That's why the hermit goes to the mountains. It's not to run, it's not to avoid, it is to clarify. Because anybody that voyages to the mountains to speak to the hermit, he knows he's going to listen. And he's not going to be wasting his time and his effort or his energy. because he doesn't have to do shit. He wants to. He wants to help. That fire alight is that want, is that will, not have to. And for as much as we associate it with seclusion, with isolation, with treating ourselves like a fucking leper, he's reaching out so much. Like, very literally, like, the structure of this body is engaged. And even the surroundings are offering of a new perspective, of a new reality. This isn't darkness and hiding. This is broad daylight. There is no reason to hide. You can't hide in red, actually. Good luck. It's a very brilliant color. Like, red cars actually statistically get pulled over more. I mean, granted, it's been a while since I read data on this, but red cars and cars of like particularly goofy colors, red cars and black cars get pulled over statistically more than like white or tan or neutral colored cars, essentially. Obviously, now there's all kinds of funny colors and what have you. But I do think that the ideas associated and the attraction that a color naturally has in the retinas very much plays a part, let alone the story that it tells and the ways that it makes us feel. And so, why would a hermit who wants nothing to do with society wear red? When red is the color of stimulus, of hunger. Because the hermit hasn't given up on us. The hermit hasn't given up on society. The hermit just had to clarify the message. The hermit hasn't given up on society. Because that red, he wants us to hunger for knowledge. He wants us to hunger for knowledge of self. He wants to lead us to the mountain, if anything. Not run from us, not hide from us. Quite honestly, even all the growth in this, things don't grow alone. Ideas don't thrive on their own. Creation doesn't thrive all alone. So consider the root systems of all of these things and how they nurture each other. Consider the ways in which the various parts of you nurture the parts of you that need your support most. How do you hold yourself when you're weary? How do you pick yourself up when you fall? How would you like to be? How would you like to be picked up when you've fallen? If you were to imagine young you fell, scraped your knee, crying, nobody's coming, and then you come. You as you are today, you come. How would you nurture that wound? Is it different than the ways in which you've experienced? If not, then what is really needed? And if so, then how can you reinvigorate that as well? And that is a salve on this wound. That is how we heal this wound. That is how we bring these edges together. Because this has also come up recently too, on the actual cellular happenings within wounds and scar tissue. Is technically it's less tensile strength because those skin cells are effectively like confused, and they're thinned out. They're more sensitive to temperature, pressure changes, da 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 da. But hypertrophic scarring which is when it grows farther out or like farther in another dimension, um, is, from what I've read, a miscalibration of those skin cells. Effectively, they're confused, and so they don't know which side to identify with, and they rapidly overgrow. Much like cancer is also a cellular identity crisis, as many have stated. Um, Specifically, Michael Levin is one of my favorite researchers. If you have not heard of him, then you haven't done Decolonize Your Mind, because I definitely link one of his resources in there, or one of his lectures in there, one of his interviews. It's not really a lecture, but with that being said, this gape is identity crisis on these cells, identity crisis in this triangle. We do not know, and it's a confusion of the nervous system. It's the nervous system under attack. It's the nervous system overwhelmed. It's the nervous system so inundated with information that it fails to recognize where it really came from. And this is like for sure after a breakup, when somebody was really abusive to you, you question your reality. You're like, was it me? Was I the abuser? Was I da 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 da? When in fact you've been like gaslit the whole fucking time. But rather than leave that wound gaping, we have to bandage it. We have to heal it. And that requires an identity sequencing of these sides of the skin. This is why super deep lacerations require internal suturing as well as like internal layer suturing or external superficial suturing, so as to bring those layers together so that they don't have to think, and they can just identify and grow together. So, how do we meet ourselves? Much like the little example I just gave you of meeting your younger self and your older self, helping your younger self. But in so many ways, meeting yourself at these points of friction, meeting yourself at the brink of what you think you are not, and clarifying what that actually means, illuminating and clarifying the truth of that, or the truth underneath that. So again, it's not fear or fearlessness, it is the willpower to meet that fear and transmute it. In so many ways, and the many threes that come up here, again, these swords are almost even being used like not as weapons, but as ways to sort of like pinch the tissue together, I suppose. And I think more often than not, the ways in which we bleed or bloodlet, if you will, is a source of relief. And I say that super metaphysically, super metaphorically. What the nervous system wants is relief, and then release is allowed to, or the actual release of these feelings, this heaviness, this density, needs to be brought to relief before it can fully be expunged or released into the ether, or released into the air. I know I said it like the opposite way before too, but it's a different reality. In different realities, these equations like to flip. Even in that, look at this blood. It purifies. It purifies. And did you know that every tear you shed is as unique as a snowflake under a microscope? And did you know that your blood, even outside of your body for a period of time, can still have active white blood cells that would fight bacteria? In which case, you are looking out for you even well after you forgot about you, in the most cellular way, in the most microscopic cellular way. You are crystalline and full of conjuration, and yet we dissuade the self by isolating and rejecting and making ourselves smaller for some reason or another, when in fact the heart wants to be bigger. The heart doesn't have any fear of love. It wants love. It's the rational mind that fears pain, that fears loss. But one of my favorite things that I often remind myself of is that the greatest thing you'll ever learn is just to be loved and love in return. I think I got that wrong too. The greatest thing you'll ever learn is just to love and be loved in return. That's what it is. That's what it is. Look at us and all these inversions. The greatest thing you'll ever learn is just to love and be loved in return. The heart wants love. You do better for your heart and your nervous system when you transmute that fear. And when you realize that guilt, fear, and shame are tenets of the structure of religious imperialism and colonization. So if you find yourself guilting yourself and shaming yourself about silly shit, you're like, why am I treating myself like a colonizer? Let me not do that. Let me offer myself more nurturing and understanding instead. When you find yourself overrun with fear, ask yourself what you're afraid of and let your deepest parts of yourself show you what it is truly that's underneath that fear. And let not that fear dictate your path, because that is a mode of religious imperialism. That's how they've constructed their thoughts and their life. That's why they're so fucking miserable. That's why they're so desperate to control everything. I feel like fear is a powerful currency of this system. And that is not to say that you're wealthy with fear. That is to say, it is designed to keep you broken or under the illusion that you are broken. Because we do not need to be fixed. We just ought to remember who we are in wholeness and what that means for our spiritual sovereignty. I have to say, too, so many people have this idea of the hermit as this like crotchety, antisocial character. And in reality, I think what a mischaracterization. Because I very much think that this character really just wants to lead you to the stars. Look at those eyes. There's something warm, something bright. Those are stars. That is welcoming, that is beckoning, that is offering. That it is not crotchety, that is not antisocial, that is not belief in the worst of. That is not the belief that we are inherently evil. Nor is that the belief that we are inherently good. Again, Uranus and Gemini. It's not one side or the other. It is the belief that we are inherently whole, that we are inherently love, that we are inherently earth, as in body, as in connection to the mind, and as in connection to our space. Otanata, Otanata, Atanata. The mind, the space, and the spirit all are closely related and influence each other. And I think this is the product of too much of our external space influencing the mind and the heart, the mind and the body, the mind and the spirit, versus the other way around. And so now that you know that system, just as easy as 3 planets aligned, the moon, the Mercury, and the Ceres, how will you redirect that? How will you redirect that focus? How will you invert the inversion so as to see the world upright? Much like they say, upright vertebrae is evolving, right? Time to evolve. All right, my friends. An integrative process. The cycle of harmonious breathing goes through each element of breath. For each element, there is a breath attached to it. We do that breath 3 times. So the fire breath. And remember, I also said fire and air was particularly pertinent here. So we'll do all of them as a cleansing and an expansion, but consider where you feel these things. Consider where your mind goes with them and how you feel after. And remember them so that you can use each element to also work within you. If you're feeling particularly unfocused and enraged, direct that focus and direct that fire. If you're feeling very out of body or overwhelmed in thought and anxious, clear that mind and that air. So, fire breath is in through the mouth and out through the nose. And we do that 3 times. An earth breath is in through the nose and out through the nose. We do that 3 times. An air breath is in through the mouth and out through the mouth with the tongue out 3 times. Specifically with the tongue out because it'll activate your diaphragm and pull it upward. That way the diaphragm and the mind are able to actually meet and mingle and collaborate rather than feel so separate and so at odds. Much like I said, again, with like north-south energies and their separations or their own misuses of direction. And a water breath is in through the nose and out through the mouth. Preferably for twice as long, if not longer. That does, with each of those elements, and those breaths bring us to 12. But if you have hung out with me at all, then you know I don't fucking like Western astrology because I think it's a tool of mind control. And if you've read the Al Sears Codex, then I mathematically explain that concept to you, in which the actual fractal innovation of Western astrology gives us internal vortex behavior with repeating integers, essentially. With repeating decimal integers, we get something called internal vortex behavior. That's like a big explosion in a tiny trash can. It's like chaos inside. But when you consider the 13th sign and the ways in which that is divisible into or innervates into 20 sign astrology or more ancestral indigenous modalities or ancestral across the board modalities, then we get more closely whole integers and we get an expansive fractal frequency, in which case that energy is actually able to branch outside of itself and create a new cycle or create a new larger loop outside of itself. So the goal here is to grow, right? That 13th is prime and is divisible by itself. So it is an identifier. It is how we go back to source. Western astrology stopped at 12. so as to keep us away from that and to keep us searching for it. Western occultism is characterized and defined, much like the patriarchy, by its withholding of information. And that is not awareness, awakening, or enlightenment. So, the 13th, consider as ether. In which case, you take a big breath in through your nose and let out an or any tone or sound that resonates with you in that moment, so as you're feeling it shaking in your body. If you've dabbled in or read the Qualities of Power, Powers of Quality, then there's empirical research to show you that as something as simple as an meditation is actually very good for inflammation in the body, especially and not limited to dealing with any sort of mental stress or unrest or diagnosis. So if you have not read it, check it out. It is very informative, and you know what? More and more, it is necessary, useful information about the breath and about the mind and about modes of control and understanding. But I digress. If you have not done this with me before, then key elements to an Aum is that Ah is the lowest vibration you can find on your belly, like the lowest feeling of vibration you can find in your belly. And if you feel like that's as low as it can go, try to go a little lower. Think just underneath your belly button. If you can feel that there, then party on. That ooh, the you feel in the cavity of your chest, tickle in your heart. But that is going to expand sideways across the shoulders, across the collarbones, down to the fingertips, before it ever goes up. Because that also hits pleasure centers. It also is very tingling in the lips. It is also very much I've noticed this in fucking Western yoga classes. Everybody's so quick to just race up to the crown and pour it out, and rushing, God, don't even spit on it and just shove it in. And so with that, consider, how do you expand your energy before you project it? How do you encompass your energy before you project it? And that's what that process is. So the ooh expands horizontally, so we have all four directions crossing. The the ooh, and the you'll feel across your lips, and you can raise it even to feel vibrating behind your eyes. And if that feels appropriate and you have the breath for it, then you can also, yes, push it out of your crown and out of the top of your head into a toroidal vortex. Which the toroidal vortex isn't just a funny visual or a thought. It is the magnetism that your skin will actually create in any given moment, but particularly with focus and stimulus. So, show. With that being said, we're going to do that all together. Cool? Party. Sip the air in through your mouth, feeling the coolness against the warmth of your body, and direct your exhale out through your nose, feeling the nerves behind your eyes come alive. Sip the air in through your mouth, feeling its coolness against the warmth in your body, opening in the shoulders and in the chest. And exhaling through the nose, feeling the breath rise behind your eyes and come alive as well. Inhaling through the mouth and exhaling through the nose, feeling that breath rise, feeling the fire rise behind your eyes. Inhaling through the nose now, feeling the space in between your shoulders open, feeling the space in your chest receive And exhaling through your nose, feeling that breath descend into the belly like nourishment. Inhaling through the nose, feeling the throat and the chest open and receive, and exhaling through the nose, feeling that breath descend into the belly, into the hips, filling your thighs and your body with nourishment. Inhaling through the nose, and exhaling through the nose, feeling the breath fill the space between your hips, grounding you, rooting you, nourishing you. Inhaling through the mouth, feeling the cool air sweep across the back of your skull, and exhale with the tongue out, feeling the diaphragm contract and rise to meet the lungs, the heart, and the mind. Inhale through the mouth, feeling the cool air pass your molars and sweep across the skull, and drawing the tongue out, exhaling, feeling that central channel align and come alive, because your diaphragm is directly connected. Your root is directly connected. Inhaling through the mouth, and drawing the tongue out, exhaling, releasing any remaining debris or stagnancy. Inhaling now through the nose, feeling air pass through both nostrils and fill the mouth and the jaw and the throat, and exhaling gently, patiently through the mouth, drawing out that exhale for as long as you can. Inhaling through the nose, feeling the space behind the jaw loosen, relax, open, and exhaling through the mouth as if you're whistling into the night, releasing any tension that remains in the body. Inhaling through the nose, feeling the space in the back of the mind open, receptive, feeling the body open, receptive, appreciating, and gently, patiently exhaling through the mouth, drawing that breath out as long as you can, like a straight path before you for your energy to travel down. Inhale through your nose, and exhale through the mouth for as long as you can. And when you relieved yourself of your last drop of air, we inhale through the nose again to prepare ourselves for an Allow yourself to just sit with the vibrations that are traveling through you and around you. Notice how your sight and your sound feel, perhaps clearer, more crisp, more aware. Notice how you feel. And trust that whatever it is you choose to direct your energy to, you are well suited to. Whether you've just done this breath with me and you're going to go rest for the evening, you are balanced. May you have a deep rest. Maybe you're going to stay up and finish paper and you missed a deadline. Then your focus is on your side. Your focus is aware of where you are and with you. It is on your side to move clearly, much like that path we created with that breath. I would love to know how that made you feel. If you would like to sound off in the comments, if you've got a little anecdotes to share with the world, there's many a powerful experience that, quite honestly, I'm continuously humbled by, whether that be migraines, headaches, soreness, tinnitus, or grief and sadness. I very much think that in cleansing the elements in a wheel and allowing us to clear a path from what we've conjured in the self is a defining light and has helped me in so many more ways than one, and has helped many of my friends in a really beautiful way. So I hope that it is something that you can keep close to you and in your back pocket for these strange times that we are in, so that you can fly freely in your mind and in your body, and so that you can be a steward of the land that you're on, as well as this body that you're in. Because I say often, land back, yes, as in the land that we are on, and the land that we ought to show some respect and some responsibility to. But also, yeah, to us, this is land that we are on too. This is fertile soil. This is how we nurture not just the soil that we are around or on, but also the soil that is us. May it be fertile grounds for new thoughts, new perspectives, and new paradigms. All right. With that, my friends, I am off. I'm off into the night to whistle with the moon. And I will see you very soon. If you follow me here, amazing, wonderful, thank you so much, appreciate you. If you have not checked out my website, check out my meditation library. There's a ton of free stuff on there. There's also all kinds of cool activations, very interesting research and reading. And if you're not following me on TikTok, perhaps hang out there too. It's a pretty cool place. It's a pretty cool little vibe. Appreciate you, Indigo Moon. Thank you so much for being here. I love the 3669 too. That's dope. That's very dope. The 6 is integral. Integral. I appreciate y'all very much. I appreciate y'all very much. And with that, bid you a sweet, 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 wonderful rest and evening, the rest of your night. Well, thank you. Well, thank you. Mwah. Oh gosh, it's so good to see you here. And yeah, until next time. But may this moon bring you much illumination and openness to learning what could be and what if. Uliliste Matsenta. Tontakoi. Until next time, my friends. Love you. Mwah. Love you. Oh gosh. See, I love my crew. The OGs are just fucking beautiful. All right. Love you. Miss you. See you soon. Mwah.